Good afternoon, everyone. I know it's been a while. Videos are not my day job, but I kind of felt like there's a few that I definitely wanted to get done for you guys. Got a little bit of maintenance I'm going to do later. That'll be a separate video. But one thing that definitely needs to get done today, and I want to talk about for a minute, is time to empty the black and the gray tanks. A lot of people are super scared of it. I guess they watched that movie RV with Robin Williams, afraid of explosions. Explosions can happen. I'll show you some things you need to be super aware of when you're dumping your tanks, or better yet, when you're putting your lines together. We'll walk through that. But it's a very easy process. We don't have a lot of smell. We don't have any smell. Matter of fact, let me correct that. We don't have any smell at all. We put treatment in our black tank. We keep the gray tank emptied when it fills up. And if you have a closed system, you don't have any leaks, you shouldn't have any smells. So I'll start with that. And then we'll get ready and go dump these tanks for you. All right, let's start by locating the wet bay. Every unit has a wet bay. If you don't know where your wet bay is, shame on you. I'll crack this open real quick. We'll take a look at what we've got set up here. First, as mentioned, I want to talk about the general setup, and I will be doing a separate video on how we set up when we get to a site, how we tear down when we leave a site. I think it's important, mainly from a hygiene perspective. I mean, most of you guys know that you don't want to do your black tank, gray tank setup before you do your fresh water setup. You don't want to tear down your black tank, gray tank setup before you tear down your fresh water, because who knows what's going to be on your hands. In any event, we talked about briefly earlier, having leaks or having explosions, as it were. Best place to get a leak is here at your connection, here at this connection, and in a minute we'll talk about the connection over at the drain. But you need to make sure that you've connected this at all 4 studs. You need to make sure you connect this at all 4 studs. If you don't, and it happens pretty often, people will put this on here and not realize they didn't catch that back stud. When you go to drain your black and gray tanks, you'll be in for a pretty big surprise. What's our other surprise area? Let's go take a look at this. And again, you'll see more about this whenever I go to show you our setup and teardown procedures. But you need one of these fittings right here. This fits, standard size sewage pipes. It's threaded. You thread that in. You connect this. It has a couple of studs as well that connect in and then latch. And you want to make sure you connect those. If you don't have this anchored down, or if you're at a site that doesn't have the threaded pipe, put something heavier over it, or when you're draining, have someone put their foot over it. It will pop up and out of that if you have enough pressure. All that being said, let's talk about pressure. I'm going to crack the black valve here, and I'll show you as we start to drain. And we had nearly a full tank. You saw there we were over 2/3. This will eventually have enough volume between the tank and the drain that there's no air in here. That's all pressure. And I get it, it looks gross, doesn't smell at all. I don't have any fear of getting poop on my hands or anything like that. So, a lot of you guys are concerned about, I should get a composting toilet. Composting toilets are pretty cool. I personally don't see the value added if you're connected to sewer. The argument is, well, we use so much fresh water. The fresh water that I use is minuscule compared to what a standard household uses any day. The sewage treatment plant isn't treating any more sewage than it would normally treat. Just not a really solid argument for me. RVers tend to be very sparing on their water usage. I'll count myself among them. What you're seeing here is at least a week's worth of tank fill. So I'm not buying that we're gosh, you use so much less water. My other fundamental problem with composting toilets is you literally have to carry the bucket of urine and drain it somewhere. So you're still going to be pouring that into a sewage system, ideally. I mean, if you're not pouring it into a sewage system, shame on you. That has to be done. You can't have wet waste inside your composting side of a composting toilet, so there's typically a separate bucket for urine that you have to dispose of. Speaking of disposing and actually having to touch human waste, the compost side is a little bucket full of peat or moss or whatever, I don't know. You literally have to empty that out. You know, it's in a bag, so unless you're really super weird, you don't have to put your hands in it. But you're having to interact with it. That grosses me out when I think about a hygiene perspective. Back to our task at hand, you can see that the black tank has effectively drained as much as it's going to. So what I do is I have a separate hose here connected to our black tank washout. Almost all modern units have a black tank washout. If yours doesn't, you can get one from Camping World or Amazon for less than $30, I think. Drill a hole into your black tank, hook up a hose, and wash it out. Why is that important? It's super important to me to wash it out after every drain, because even though we do keep a couple of gallons of water at the bottom of our tank, no matter what, you're going to wind up with, you just saw that pass right there, you're going to wind up with solid waste that didn't get rinsed out or didn't get drawn out with that first flush, when we opened the gate and flushed it. So you come behind it with fresh water at pressure. Inside the black tank there's a spray head. Many of the new ones spin around. They're called tornadoes or vornadoes or something like that. I've actually changed ours out before in our tank. It doesn't spin, but it has a couple of jets that spray the walls, and then of course rinse the walls down, provide fresh water on the base of the tank that flushes out, I'd say most, if not all, of the remaining solid material in there. That's paper, and that's, of course, human waste. If any of that grosses you out, you might want to avoid getting an RV. You are going to have to interact with it at some point, unless you either tent camp or RV and decide to walk to the nearest bathhouse for every bodily function that you have during your stay. Which I mean, unless you're some sort of stoic, you're going to have to go to the bathroom sooner or later. I typically let my fresh water rinse out, run until the water's pretty clean. You may notice every couple of seconds I'll see a piece of solid material go through, so I'm kind of letting that wrap up. It's clean water right now. It's clean enough for my requirements, since all I really want is to make sure that we don't have a whole bunch of solid waste in there. I'm going to say, judging from the water that's drained, if there's any left in there, they're just not going to come out anytime soon. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to reset our gauge here. I'm going to wait for it to hit 0.3 of a gallon just to compensate for the volume of water that's already in there. I'm going to shut this. I'm going to wait until that gauge reads 2.5 gallons. Then I'll shut my rinse off again, so that I have at least 2.5 gallons of water in the black tank before I say I'm done, right? That way I know that I have water in the bottom. We're full timers, so it's not a huge deal, but if you are a weekend RVer, make sure you keep water in here. If you drain it completely and take it back and park it somewhere with no water in the bottom, you're going to wind up with some pretty rugged, what I like to call stalactites. It's going to happen, so keep a little bit of water in here after every rinse. And I'll go ahead and open this up, our gray water. I do the gray water second because it now flushes this line from the black water that was in there. You can see now pretty much just have the gray water coming out. For what it's worth, I think gray water is every bit as nasty as black water. Really just dirty water. There's no smell out here, again, because we have a sealed system. The vent for the black and the gray tanks are right there. Not sure if you see them right at the roof line there. But yeah, if you have a lot of smell, you've got a problem somewhere. You either have a blocked vent or you have a leak in your system. I'm gonna go ahead and let this drain out. You saw I just shut the Blackwater washout off. That way I know I have water in my black tank. Still draining gray water. It's going to continue rinsing out the line, the sewer line. I'll leave it the way it is until I'm ready to leave. And again, you'll see that in a separate video. You'll see how we disassemble everything and put it away. And I get to stay clean. I do not fear for my health at all with the system I have in place. I'm going to go ahead and let this keep running. I will be shutting it when it's done draining, because you also want to make sure you have water in your gray tank. As I said, there's just as many nasty things in there that, you know, that aren't solid human waste, but it's pretty dirty water. I personally think it smells worse than black water. And then we will put our septic tank treatment in the toilet so that it will help decompose the solid waste as we, you know, refill it over the next week. And I'll put a link to the product we use. I forget the name of it, but it's very good. It has no chemicals. It's like using Riddex on your septic tank. It eats up the biomass, and you wind up with a pretty clean system. Thanks for sitting through that with me if you sat through it this long, and you guys have a great day.